So, hello everyone, and welcome again to our noon lunchtime webinar, which is titled In Their Own Words, Insights into the Online BA in Psychology program. So thank you to those of you who've logged on to join us, and thank you to our three speakers today, Lauren, Diane, and Jacqueline. So I want to give you just a little bit of information about our Bachelor's in Psychology program, just the sort of facts. And then I want to launch into really a more of a conversation about the program and successes and hurdles. And I want to give our panelists an opportunity to really tell you what it's like from the perspective of a student. So as the director of the program, I can tell you what it's like from my perspective, but obviously that's not really as insightful to you as a possible student in terms of learning, what the nitty gritty is like, what it's like to learn online. And also we want to give you an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So if there are things that we don't cover, then you can have whatever questions you have answered. So just to give you, like I said, a little bit of basics about the program. So I'll give you a little bit of general information. So our Bachelor's in Psychology program at CUNY SPS started we started in the 2013. So the program's only been around a few years, 2012, sorry. And we are the only online or fully online program at CUNY. Now, there are lots of bachelor's programs around the CUNY system. However, this one is the only one that's fully online. There are other programs at CUNY like John Jay, et cetera, who have one or two courses or even a handful of courses that you can take online. But we're really proud of the fact that we offer a fully online program that makes it possible for people who otherwise couldn't pursue a degree if they couldn't do so in a face-to-face course. So this really gives people some flexibility, especially for people who are working or people who have lots of responsibilities, as our three panelists can attest to. So when you have a working life, a family life, all of the things that we juggle, being able to attend courses face to face is almost impossible, especially when you factor in travel time, et cetera. So being able to log on at times that are more convenient really has given SPS an opportunity to cater to those students and to fill that niche that wasn't being filled by CUNY otherwise. So as I mentioned, we really focus on degree completion and working adults. So for our program, students have to have had 24 credits to transfer into SPS and complete their degree. And we try and keep in mind the fact that people are working and give them that opportunity to log on at times that are convenient. Some of our students log on at 2 o'clock in the morning if that's the time that works for their schedule. Some log on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or all of the variety of time combinations that you can think of. But we always say 3 to 4 times a week keeps you on top of your work. What those 3 or 4 times are is really up to you. So our program is affordable, it's flexible, but most importantly, it allows students who cannot attend full-time and who want to attend part-time to come and to feel welcome. And as long as students are taking one course a semester and making progress, we're really happy with that. Many of our students take more than that, but only a small percentage of our students actually are full-time for the very reasons that I mentioned before. They just have their plates are just so full. So our program is taught by both academics and practitioners. So they have one foot in the academic world, one foot in the quote unquote real world. So we're proud of that because what that does is it allows you to get the theory and the knowledge base that you need while also gaining those skills that are necessary to hit the ground running on day one when you go into the workforce. So our bachelor's program has 3 tracks. So the degree that people graduate with is a bachelor's in psychology, but on your transcript is also your concentration or your track. And those tracks include psychopathology, psychological development, and organizational development. So if we think about organizational development first, some people talk about it as the business world meets psychology, but I think a better definition is really the application of psychology and the study of behavior to organizations and the workplace. And then the second track is the psychological development track. And another way to think about that is if you flip it, developmental psychology. So looking at people's growth, their social growth, their emotional growth, cognitive growth, physical growth from the time they're born all the way to late adulthood and their stage of aging and later death. And then the third track is the psychopathology track. And that's more of the track that people really think of when they think about psychology. It's the clinical, the therapeutic track. And then just a last FYI, we do also have a master's program that we launched in spring of 2016. We have our first graduates this semester, spring of 18, and that program was designed to offer students who finish the bachelor's in psychology another pathway through to a graduate degree who otherwise wouldn't be able to attend a graduate program for the same reasons I talked about before, the inability to attend for numerous reasons a face-to-face program. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of information about some of the background of our program. And I really want to talk a little bit about why we put together this panel. So this panel, in your own words, Insights into the Online BA in Psychology program, was thought as an opportunity to allow you to hear from people who have already experienced some time at SPS. So all of our three panelists have graduated from this program very recently, and they were kind enough to come back to SPS to share their experiences, their successes and their hurdles, and to give advice for anyone who's considering not just the CUNY SPS program, but online learning in general. And then at the end of this, as I mentioned previously, we're going to allow about 15 to 20 minutes of the webinar to really open it up for you to ask questions either of me as the director of the program or any of our three panelists or all of them to find out all of the things that you really want to know as you're trying to make this decision about which program to pursue in your quest to finish your degree. So I want to turn it over to our panelists and allow them to introduce themselves, but I first want to just introduce myself a little more formally. My name is Dr. Carla Marquez Lewis, and I am the director for both our bachelor's and master's programs here at the CUNY School of Professional Studies. My job is really to oversee these programs, to help in the development of our curriculum, to ensure things are running smoothly, and to really, hear our students and to get the word out about our program and to answer questions and really be a representative for this program. So with that, I want to turn it over to Lauren to introduce herself, followed by Diane and then Jacqueline.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Fink, and I graduated just recently in fall 2017. And that's about it.
Lauren, which was your track again?
My track was organizational psychology.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Galasso. I graduated May 2017. I was in the psychopathology track of SPS. I guess that's it.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Jacqueline Rivera, and I'm also a BA in psychology graduate here at SPS, and my area of study was abnormal psychology, and I graduated fall 2017.
Great. So we have a little bit of a good representation, and that'll be great as we talk about your experiences so that, students kind of who have questions about different areas, we can direct them to whichever of you are in the best position to answer the question. So to get started, give me just one second. There we go. Okay, so I wanted to start really a little bit more broadly. So could each of you talk a little bit about why you chose to finish your degree with CUNY SPS? So as we know, there are lots of CUNY campuses and lots of colleges. Why SPS? So I think we'll start maybe in the order that we originally started your introductions. Maybe Lauren, you could tell us a little bit about your decision, and then Diane and Jacqueline.
Okay. I decided to attend CUNY SPS because the psychology major had a track in organizational psychology, and I wanted to use and apply what I had learned from my psychology major in the workplace more than using it to counsel people. And plus, I wanted to do it all online because it fit my schedule when I worked part-time. So it was exactly what I was looking for, and I finally found it. So yeah, that's about it. I was looking around and I finally found it, and that's about it.
Great. Thanks, Lauren.
You're welcome.
So I was actually out of school for about 15 years and had always wanted to finish my degree. But it was problematic because I work full time. My schedule is very difficult. So periodically I would actually sort of investigate schools, and I actually checked out quite a few CUNY schools, and it was just too difficult to get to a campus, or the program wasn't a match for me. And I came across CUNY SPS. Since I was younger, I actually always liked psychology, and when I saw that they had a fully online psychology program, I decided to take the plunge. So part of my reasons for choosing SPS is I was getting the CUNY experience, which is also what I wanted. It's affordable. The academia is really great, and it was fully online. It worked with my schedule, and it actually allowed me to finish my degree. That otherwise, regular traditional classroom settings, I probably would not have been able to complete the degree.
Great. Thanks, Diane.
So I was attending Lehman College before I enrolled at SPS, and the reason why I enrolled at SPS was because they had a fully online program for in psychology, and I currently work as a freelancer, so my schedule is it's pretty much here and there, and I needed, a program that would allow me to not have to sit in a classroom at a specified day and time of the week, so that the online program allowed me to have more freedom to, schedule my work and to schedule my classroom assignments according to the time that I had available. That was the main reason why I chose SPS.
So all three of you, thanks, Jacqueline. All three of you have mentioned the flexibility of online learning as being one of those big things that drew you, and I imagine it's probably what draws a lot of people to online learning. And I'm just curious, did you find that it was as flexible as you thought it'd be? And any of you can answer that.
Um, yes and no. It gave me the flexibility to sign on whenever I needed to, but there were strict deadlines that had to be followed. So it's better to manage that with. I use a desk calendar to manage that, and I was able to meet my deadlines doing it that way.
I'd have to agree with Lauren on that. The flexibility of actually being, sort of air quoting in the classroom was a draw because you can sign on at any point in time, any hour. But then the specifics within the class, there were certain deadlines. So managing your schedule is definitely important.
Yeah, I agree as well. Definitely, there were deadlines for every assignment, and it had to be turned in on the deadline, which was, I mean, but yet, like Lauren said, you got to keep a schedule and you got to keep track of everything you're doing.
I should probably tell those who are listening that Lauren is joining us remotely, as is Diane, and Jacqueline's here with me in the studio. So I wanted to point that out because I think it's important for people who are considering online learning to also know that it's it's possible for you to create community and to create a panel, and to create a classroom environment where you feel like you're all sort of in the same space, but you're not. So that question comes up a lot. How do you not feel lonely? And I think this is probably a good example of how you can still create an environment of togetherness, even though you're all separated. So I wanted to ask all of you as well. So you gave a little bit of information about why you joined SPS, but I wanted to get a little more specific. What made you choose psychology? So everyone has their story about when that moment came where they decided their major. Can you tell us a little bit about yours, and maybe we'll try a different order, maybe Diane and then Jacqueline and then Lauren?
Sure. Um, so, like I said earlier, I've always been interested in psychology, except I really didn't know it as psychology. I knew it as I'm really interested why this person acts that way. Why does that person think that way? And it wasn't until I was a little bit older that I understood it to be psychology. And two things specifically of why or how I chose psychology. One day I was reading a book, and in the book they talked about attachment styles, and I just fell in love with that theory. And again, that sort of led me to psychology. And then after some life circumstances of my own, and um, the death of a parent, and uh, someone else, I sort of needed to have my own, I had my own experience with anxiety, and uh, speaking to someone about it, and then sort of getting that sense of healing and understanding. That was for me probably the moment where I said, I want to do this. I want to be able to get the tools and the knowledge to help people sort of live the best life that they can. So that was probably my aha moment, if we'll call it that.
So I got into psychology because I actually was considering in becoming a school counselor. Because when I was in middle school and when I was in high school, I remembered my counselors at school. They were like my backbone. They were my major source of support. And whenever I had any issues or with assignments or other students or just anything at home, there was somebody I can come in and sit down and talk with. And it was very comforting. And it was a major social and academic support for me throughout school.
I have to agree with Diane. I found the motivations and causes of human behavior very interesting. And I like to understand the motive that drives a person to behave in the manner that they do. And it helps me understand challenges that I went through or do go through, and to understand myself, to grow and understand the functionality of relationships, friendships, work, and society. And even at work, I get to understand what motivates people to succeed and achieve, what makes them become ambitious. And that's it.
Thank you. And were there any misconceptions for any of you? I mean, d- was psychology all that you thought it was? I, as the director of the program, I get to hear from students who say, I thought psychology was A, and now I'm seeing psychology as B. Or I have students who say, yes, it's exactly what I thought I was getting into. So I was wondering from your perspectives, were there any misconceptions or any surprises?
Um, no, I was not surprised about anything. I didn't have any misconceptions about it. It was what I expected. I expected to understand human behavior and its motivations and causes, and I did. So I was really happy with it.
I actually did experience some surprises. I was not expecting psychology to be so scientific, actually. I thought it would be all of these great classes on human behavior and that type of stuff. When we got into the biology of the brain and research and statistics, I was surprised by that, but I actually also really surprised myself because I liked that. So that was really interesting because I was not expecting to be introduced to that. If you had asked me previously, do I like biology, I would have absolutely said no way. And once getting into it and understanding and then connecting it to how a person thinks and certain behaviors, it was fascinating.
Yeah, similar to Diane. I was pretty surprised. I didn't know psychology had so many subjects, from social psychology to biology, psychobiology, from cognitive psychology. There's just so much to cover that I was so surprised that psychology is just more than just, the individual and, the way the individual thinks or the individual behaves. It also goes from the individual to the social, the group, to the mass. And it also goes not just from thinking, but also from biological, chemical reactions in the brain, which was very, very interesting and very surprising.
I think I think that's probably the number one thing I hear from students who are surprised is they say I didn't understand it was so scientific. And that there was so much biology. One of the first courses that students take, as you all know, is Psychology 210, the biological basis of behavior. And we go through how neurons, work and the structures of the brain. And I inevitably hear from at least one or two students who say, "Why do I have to know this stuff? I'm not interested in being a biologist, or I don't, care much about biology." But in order to understand the higher level processes, right, how people think or how people remember, you have to understand how those networks work. So with those courses, yeah, we lay a foundation, and then hopefully we build upon them. But I'm glad to hear that all of your experiences, whether it was a surprise or not, that it turned out that they were positive. And Diane, I love that you surprised yourself in loving research and stats, because I think um, I can tell you from my experience as well. If anyone would have told me 20 years ago that I would love statistics the way I do, I would have said you're crazy. But statistics, once you learn about them, and they tend to be a little less scary, and hopefully, you took something away. And we'll talk a little bit more about what you're doing now, Diane. But I think those skills have probably served you well um, for your current work. So let's go ahead and move a little bit on from psychology. I wanted to know a little bit about, your experiences in the program. So aside from your surprises, were there any things that you found particularly difficult? And it could be either about the program or online learning, or any hurdles that you encountered. You can kind of think about these two questions, I think, as sort of part of one. Um, Diane, what about you? Were there parts of the program or parts of online learning that you particularly struggled with, or things that you encountered that were problematic?
I think one thing that was a bit of a challenge to me was the when you're online and if you have a question and you want to ask your professor, you have to email them. And there's been a standard of, sort of, we'll get back to you within 48 hours. Sometimes that's difficult if you're reading something and want to understand it so that you can move forward. So to wait that period of time is sometimes a challenge. So what I had to do was I found myself sort of YouTubing or looking up things on Google or the library, doing searches like that. So that was a little bit of a challenge to me because
Hmm.
it's very different than an online classroom where you have a professor in front of you and you ask a question and you get immediate feedback. So the challenge of having to wait was probably one of the biggest hurdles. Um, yeah, I think that would probably be the biggest for me.
Hmm. Yeah, and as you point out, we sort of ask professors to respond within 24 to 48 hours, but that can be a really long time for students when they're waiting on a piece of information. So I think that's a good point. Jacqueline, how about you?
I mean, the program it was pretty easy, but the most difficult part I would say that I found about the program was for example, if I had an assignment and I couldn't understand something about the assignment. Now, the thing was also that I'm kind of like a last minute kind of get things done person. So, it's like if I needed to ask a question and it was like I'm doing it over the weekend, usually over the weekend, it's like, I mean, nobody's working and usually professors don't email around that time, but I needed, like a quick response. So that was pretty difficult, but I usually got over it pretty well, pretty easy. So
And when that happened, Jacqueline, how did you handle those situations? What did you do instead if you weren't able to sort of reach someone over the weekend?
I, I mean, I would just go over the syllabus or the instructions more carefully, and just kind of I would just go step by step on the assignment. Usually the instructions are like step by step. So I would just get the first part of the assignment done, then I'll get the second part done, and I would just try to go through that and just kind of, hope that I'm doing the right thing. And that's how I would get over it. So.
Great, thanks. Lauren,
Can
how
I
about
say
you?
something
What
to
what were
that?
your experiences?
Well, I just remembered that there was a hurdle that I've encountered, and it was when there was a professor who did not make the instructions or explanations clear enough, and they were not organized. So it made me feel really confused. And this was rare. It was actually just one professor. But so what I did was I would reach out and email the professor, and I didn't always get a response. So I had to figure it out myself and look over the instructions again or explanations, and I just had to figure it out like a puzzle. And of course, there were also the strict deadlines, but I used a desk calendar to help with that. And another struggle was that I couldn't get in-person lectures to further understand concepts and lessons. For example, in statistics class, I found it really intense and confusing. So that was a struggle, but I managed. Somehow I managed, but that was a struggle for statistics class. So
Mhm. And for
Can I say
statistics,
something
yeah,
about that?
sure, sure.
Um, so what I wanted to mention was with your classes, you also get a roster of who's in the class, and you begin to get familiar with people. And this happened with myself. I started to connect with certain people, and even though it's online, you really do form friendships. I still actually talk to some people that I've graduated with. But when I did find myself in that situation where I needed, like, or wanted more of an immediate answer or just to run something by someone, I was able to go into the roster and email the person. And many times the students are online, especially like Lauren said, like if you're on the weekend or, you do weekend work, a lot of times a student will answer, and then sometimes you just form that relationship where you can talk back and forth about it, and you actually learn from one another. So that was sort of another way that, in addition to like YouTube or Google, that
Hmm.
I would help remedy the situation of feeling like, I need an answer or I want to understand something better.
Right. And I think that's a good point. Each of the classes also has an area in the site called the cafe, if you all remember, and it was an area that's designated for students to interact with each other and ask each other questions. So it sounds like you guys utilize those and to the best of your ability. But I think you all raise some very realistic problems, right, that come up with online learning. And while we try and safeguard against those things with guidelines for professors, sometimes you don't hear back as quickly as you want, or sometimes, as you point out, Lauren, the directions or the instructions aren't as clear, right? As you need or
Right.
as you would like, or there are instances where the deadlines kind of creep up. So organization, becomes really important. So I think you've raised some really common issues that come up with online learning.
I think one of the major forms of resources, tools, and supports was my advisor, Jan Sartoretto. She was the best. If I had any issues with a class or just in general, like when I needed, for example, like one thing I liked about SPS was that there was a lot of organization and there was a lot of structure. From the beginning, when I enrolled in the program, they already told me the classes I needed to take in order to complete my degree. And that was great because I've been to other CUNY schools and I didn't have that kind of support or that kind of resource. So whenever I needed, for example, the next class was coming up, I just contacted my advisor and she would, gladly help me and tell me what was the next step. Um, and if I needed to talk to anyone in the school, like, if I needed extra help or extra support, she always gave me contact informations for professors, for, the dean and things like that. And it was very, very great, very wonderful source of support.
That's great to hear. So, what Jacqueline's talking about is when students come into SPS, every student is matched up with an academic advisor, and that academic advisor stays with you through the entirety of the program and your time at SPS. And their job is to help you, as she said, structure everything that you need to get you to the finish line so that you're never wondering what's the next step or where do I go, and to reduce the likelihood that you're going to take a course that you didn't need to take or help you structure your credits so that you can walk away with not just a degree, but also a minor if you want it or some other certification. Diane or Lauren, were there any resources or supports that were helpful to you?
I have to agree that it was my advisor. She answered a lot of my questions and directed me to wherever I needed to go for further answers. And a tool that was really helpful on Blackboard was the APA guidelines, because APA is used a lot. So I was able to use the link that was provided, that some professors provided. So that was really helpful.
So, for those of you who are listening and aren't familiar, in psychology, the writing style that we use is APA format, and that's the American Psychological Association's format of writing. And one has to adhere to the specific ways to cite sources or ways in which we write that are particular to psychology. And so what Lauren's talking about is in the course sites, is a menu on the left-hand site. It's the navigation panel. And some professors offer information to refresh your memory because we know that students don't memorize the APA manual. If you've ever seen it, it's a huge book. It's quite big, and so there are some shortcuts to help you with your writing since you're writing in a new style. Diane, how about you? I was curious what your supports were, or if there were any that helped you along the way.
Well, there definitely were. And in fact, speaking of writing, the writing fellows, and they were amazing. Again, being out of school for so long, it was a bit intimidating, at first writing papers. So the writing fellows were a great resource where I can submit what I've written and they would look it over and give me, some advice as far as format and introductions, bodies, conclusions. Like they really helped ease a lot of anxiety, to be honest, with just helping me formulate what the paper should look like. And also, what I thought was great was the connection into the library, the Newman Library, because again, part of the reason of online learning is convenience. So I didn't have the time, and frankly, even after a full workday, the energy to run out to my local library or to find a library. And this was great because I could just sign right in, search, and we had access to so many different journals, and um, we had this all at our fingertips. Those were the resources. In addition to, I agree with Jacqueline and Lauren about the academic advisor, but those, in addition, were some resources that I used all the time.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I'm glad you brought those up as well, Diane. For those who aren't familiar with our writing fellows, we are lucky enough to have, and this is CUNY wide, graduate students who are working on their PhDs in the final stages of their PhD, who work at various CUNY campuses, and their position is called a writing fellow, and they work with undergraduate students and also students in master's programs to help them with their writing and to really offer supports, a second set of eyes, or if you need some questions, or if your professor isn't one of the professors that Lauren mentioned that puts the APA formatting link in the menu, you can go to these writing fellows and they're trained in APA formatting and they can help you as well. And then the other tool that Lauren mentioned, or sorry, that Diane mentioned, was the Newman Library. And the Newman Library is the library that we use. It's actually Baruch's library, and Baruch is just down the street from us. And their library, if you physically go there, is huge and amazing and beautiful and wonderfully, stocked with journals and books. But those resources are provided virtually as well, so that our students can tap into those. So in terms of the supports, it sounds like the academic advisors, and I'm not surprised. We hear a lot about how successful the academic advisor uh, path is here at SPS, and I think part of that is because someone knows you and they know your path. But it's also that you always have someone who, and I hate to use the word, a concierge, but they're sort of that way, because if you need, you have a question about billing, they can direct you to the place that you need to go. If you have a question about needing a tutor for math, they can direct you where to go, so they can help you facilitate and navigate your way through the program too. So it's great to hear that feedback. So I want to talk a little bit about what you've been doing since graduation, because a lot of times we get um, you know people who are prospective students asking, what do I do with a degree in psychology? So I was hoping maybe each of you could talk a little bit more about what you've been doing since graduation, even though for some of you that's only been a month or two, but also how your time at SPS impacted your post-graduation life, or has impacted it so far. So maybe we'll start with Jacqueline, and then we can go to Lauren and then Diane.
So far, I've been working in marketing and freelancing and marketing for the past 8 years, I would say. I'm still currently doing that, but I am considering perhaps pursuing a master's in psychology. I'm not sure about that yet, though, I have to be honest. So I'm still currently doing the marketing.
Great.
Am I up? Okay, since graduation, I've been gathering important documents such as official transcripts, because in my experience, some employers want to see transcripts because they want to see your grades. It doesn't happen often, but it happened once or twice. So I've been collecting those, and I've also been deciding if I want to apply to graduate school and assessing which careers that I would be best suited for with the skills that I have acquired from being a psychology major at CUNY SPS. And CUNY SPS impacted me by allowing me to build and improve my skills, and it built and improved my analytical research and writing skills, critical thinking skills, communication skills, and leadership skills. So I have been aware of those skills that I built up on while assessing which career would match well with me.
That's great. Thanks, Lauren.
So I'm still in the process.
Right. And you've only been, both Jacqueline and Lauren just finished in December. So So they've been out of school for about a month and a half now. So this is not a surprise that you're figuring out what the next steps are. Diane, you've had a little bit longer since you graduated in the spring, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you've been doing since graduation.
Sure. So first, I would say that my intention to finish the degree was just that. It was supposed to be a terminal degree. I just really wanted to complete my bachelor's, and I wanted to do it in something that I liked, which was psychology. And what SPS actually gave me was such I was going to sort of be hallmarkish, but a love for this field and to learn more. I was definitely bitten by the education bug at SPS, and I work in a medical center, and I've been here for 26 years in an administrative position, and I have definitely expanded my vision. After my degree, I have thought to myself, I can do something further with this. And I'm actually now a career changer. So I am in my second semester at Fordham University pursuing my master's in social work with the intent of getting an LCSW to be a clinical social worker, which is the mental health portion of social work. I will tell you that so far in these 2 semesters that I've taken, SPS has actually given me such a great foundation. I went into these classes initially, again, a little intimidated because it's the first of anything, and I never even thought I'd be in a master's program. And when I went in, and the information that was being presented was familiar to me because I had learned it in SPS. So it was sort of a really great transition to go from the BA in psychology right into this program here to get my master's. And like I said, ultimately, my goal is to be an LCSW psychotherapist. So that's where I'm headed.
Great. And I had mentioned earlier that I know because you and I have had conversations that the research and stats courses have come in handy. Um, that's great. I'm glad to hear that you're doing great, and you're finishing in 2 more semesters, right?
Um, no, actually, I'm taking a part-time program.
Okay.
Um, so it's uh, like 4 more semesters. But interestingly, SPS has given me such a great foundation with research that my advisor at Fordham has waived me for Research 1, and I'm right in the advanced class.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't know that
So
actually.
yeah, so SPS actually saved me money too.
There you go.
Yeah.
Um, so, if you were to think about, and there are people that are listening who are considering a an online program um, at CUNY SPS. So, if you were to think about your advice for someone considering finishing their degree, or even your top three, tips for someone who's going to be here at SPS, um, you can tackle it, with either of those questions. But what advice would you give to those who are listening, considering a program? Diane, do you want to start, and then Lauren, and then Jacqueline?
Sure. So I would actually want to address someone considering the program who's a little bit on the older side. I'm in my 40s, and initially thinking about going back to school was very intimidating. So my advice to that person would be you're never too old. And actually, we offer something as an older adult in the program. Um, it's, I had to take everything into consideration. The fact that, I am older and I have to work and everything, but it's doable. So the advice I would give someone is to just apply and go for it. In all honesty, it was probably the best decision I made.
Great.
Okay. To finish your degree, I would say that you need to be patient, very determined, goal oriented, and perseverant. And if you have these four qualities and mindset, then you will definitely finish your degree. And I would say the three tips that for pursuing the psychology major would be to make sure that you have at least some analytical and communication skills. Make sure that you love to research and write, or at least have a passion for psychology or human behavior. And also make sure that you are able to manage your time to meet many deadlines.
Great.
So I would say my advice for someone would be for considering, definitely go for it. It's a great program. There's just so much about it that's wonderful. The flexibility, as we have mentioned, it's inexpensive, it's affordable. I can say that the professors here are very supportive. They're wonderful. The advisors are great. And for my top three tips for someone pursuing a degree in psychology would be definitely you gotta have, you gotta be motivated, you gotta be organized, and you gotta want this more than anything, because it's such an independent program. You're doing everything on your own. You're looking up the syllabus. You're looking up the assignments. You gotta set your own date and time to read the textbooks, to get things done. So it's like it's all coming from you, really, and you have all this wonderful support to get you there.
Great. Thank you. I think you gave some good tips. For those people who are listening right now, what questions do you have of our panelists or of me? We're happy to answer them, and um, just send them in. Any questions? While we're waiting for the questions to come in, Lauren and Jacqueline, you'll be participating in our graduation ceremony on June 1st. That's taking place at Lincoln Center. Diane, you've already experienced it, and you had mentioned before that a lot of people think that online learning is very siloed and isolating, but that you you met a lot of friends and people you still keep in touch with. And I wonder, were there any people that you saw at graduation who you maybe had never seen before, and maybe you could tell people what graduation is like? Because I think as people are thinking about the program, it's always good to have your eye on the prize. So maybe
Hmm.
you could tell them a little bit about that experience.
Sure, that was a great experience, actually. I loved it. So during the course of um, the program, you will see similar names in classes. So you get to know people a little bit. And for me, there were a couple of people who, you just know when you connect. You connect on Blackboard, and on Blackboard, when you have assignments, you get to respond to one another. So you really do begin to develop some sort of rapport with other people, even though it's online. And there were a few events that I actually was able to attend. So I met one or two people. So that was really fun. And then at graduation, when um, you actually met the people behind the computer, it was like a big reveal. I mean, you're so excited because you're graduating, and then you get to see these people who you've been talking to for, I mean, I was in the program for 2 years, um, and it's just a great experience. I felt so accomplished, so much pride. Like anything in life, there's gonna be bumps along the road, right? But at the end of this, like you said, to keep your eye on that goal, it was just one of the most rewarding experiences that I've had to date, to be honest.
Great. Thank you, Diane. For those of you who've never been to Lincoln Center at the David Geffen Hall, it's really breathtaking. And as Diane said, it's a really happy occasion, and people feel so accomplished. And it's it's really something. It's my favorite time of year. It's students' favorite time of year. So it's the one time that we do encourage, but we don't mandate, but we encourage people to try and uh, come and be present if they can. Although it's a fully online program, this is the one time I always say, make the effort to be here, no matter where you are, if you can, because it's really great. So we have a few questions that have come in. Someone asked if you can share the time commitment each week per class. That's a great question. I can tell you from the director's point of view, our rule of thumb around SPS for undergraduate classes is um, 9 to 12 hours of coursework per week per class. Obviously, that varies depending on the class, but it's a rule of thumb. Um, Anyone want to say whether that held true for them or not?
I actually found myself spending more time, um, between the reading and the posting and um, all that goes into it. But it's broken up. So I remember when I had come to one of the informational sessions and they said just that, you're looking at like 9 to 12 hours a week. And I thought to myself, well, I work 40 hours a week and here's 12 hours a week. It felt overwhelming, but the reality is because it's broken up during the week, it was manageable. um, manageable with structure.
Hmm.
Like I think we've all said, I've kept a calendar also of all of my assignments that were due. When they were due, I knew I had to read by this day. Friday was designated for this. It's just organizing, but you are going to put hours in.
Thanks, Diane. We have a question here. Someone said, I've heard a lot of horror stories about online students who were not able to gain help from administrators if they ran into problems with their curriculum. What is some advice for online students who need assistance but cannot get help in a timely manner? Um, I can say that it depends on what someone needs help with. So I know you didn't ask about this, but I will address the technology piece. So sometimes people run into issues with technology and things just are not working for them, or they can't log in, or they're, it's rare, but it does happen. We have a help desk and they have evening hours and weekend hours so that students can call in and get that kind of tech help that they need. In terms of curriculum, so I think we were talking about earlier that it's especially on weekends. It's sometimes hard to get a hold of professors. So most professors check their email at least one day during the weekend, so that no longer than 24 to 48 hours goes by before you would get a response. But if you were working on the weekend, you know, I think someone mentioned just being resourceful, sort of learning how to review the syllabus and learning how to review Jacqueline said she reviews the step-by-step directions. Diane mentioned accessing the cafe or emailing directly to classmates and being able to talk to them. Does anyone else want to add anything that I may have forgotten that you mentioned earlier?
Well, I have something to add about this. I actually had this issue with administration and receiving replies and responses. I had this issue with John Jay actually, but John Jay it is an excellent school. I did go there for 2 years and then I transferred to SPS. And I never had these issues at SPS, but I had it at John Jay. And still, John Jay is an excellent school. I'm just saying that I understand the what the speaker is saying. So, but I just want to say that SPS I did not have these problems with. They were very professional and efficient. So,
Great.
And I would say with the IT piece, um, it could be challenging if you think about what if my computer doesn't work? What if, something's down on SPS, um, the end over there? And there was one time I remember that I think they were having problems with some kind of connection from the IT service at SPS. And I remember stressing, thinking, I have an assignment due, I have this Blackboard thing I have to post. But I was actually able to email my professor and say, there's an issue with Blackboard, so just be aware. This way, we're not late. And also was provided an email for the IT team at SPS, and they acknowledged pretty quickly and said, we weren't aware, and looked into it, and I would say within a few hours it was corrected. So I haven't had really any problems with like the technical stuff or the administrative stuff. I found everybody actually pleasant and responsive.
Great. Someone asked a question. Let's see. Um, is an online program enough to face the work field after graduation? I think that's a great question. So, does anyone want to take that? Maybe Diane, since you're in a graduate program right now, specifically in a very hands-on area, social work. How did the online program prepare you for this sort of very hands-on field?
So I think to answer that question, really I would want to say it depends on what you want to do after the BA in psychology. At that point, you can't practice, right? You need further education. I think it gave a great foundation. I came away with really good knowledge and understanding of the field. I think because of the direction I'm going in, which is the direction of clinical social work, I needed more of the hands-on. So I think that's what I would say to that. Like for me, I was able to, Fordham offers a weekend program, which is how I was able to now transition back into the classroom for a hands-on, because I think for the humanities and social work, I think it's important to be in that social environment.
Great. I also think it's worth mentioning too that, there's also the reverse, how you can get credit for work that you've already done, hands-on work in your field. So if you're working in an area that's related to a particular class that you need to take, we have something called PLA, and it offers credit for prior learning, and you can create a portfolio to demonstrate the skill set that you've learned from your work on site, and then translate that to credit for that particular course. So that's sort of working backward. I would agree with Diane that it does depend. It's true on what it is you want to do, but there are things that we do in this program that do mimic sort of the work that we can do later. So for example, if you're interested in organizational development, that track, what we also call industrial organizational, these people are mostly working in HR departments or focused on retention um, of talent and talent acquisition. We have a course, for example, that's called an interviewing, and that looks at the best way interviewing practices, and there's technology that we can use that can mimic those things. So students have mock interviews where they actually video record themselves and then submit that to a forum, and then people comment and point out, as does the professor, on where things could have been improved, or looks at their body language and things like that. So we have those kinds of technologies. But is it ever going to be the exact same as working, in person? It really depends. It depends on the course. It depends on what you want to do. So it's a little bit trickier for me to answer when I'm not sure what specifically you want to do. But one thing to keep in mind, and a question that has not come up yet, but often does come up, is whether or not people can practice with just a bachelor's degree, and that's not possible. You have to get a graduate degree if you want to practice as a clinician of any sort, or do therapy, or group sessions, etc. So that's where you get that very hands-on experience if you want to work in a clinical setting. So the last question we'll have time to answer, because I do want to honor our stop time for our panelists and for our listeners, is how intuitive is the learning portal? So someone asked, does it work across many platforms, a PC, a Mac? Um, can each of you maybe talk about which platform you use? Did you use a PC? Did you use a Mac? And how intuitive was Blackboard? So for those of you who don't know, Blackboard is our learning management system. And Blackboard, you log into Blackboard and then you click on the link for your course and it takes you into your course site. So maybe Lauren and then Diane and then Jacqueline.
Well, I used a PC for Blackboard. I tried to use my tablet or my phone, and it just did not work the same. So I found it easier to use the PC. And as far as the, I'm sorry, Carla, could you repeat the question?
Sure.
About, could you go a little bit further and explain what do you mean by intuitive?
Sure. I think what the person is asking is, was Blackboard tricky, or was it sort of, really people friendly?
Okay. Yes, it is people friendly. I have made friends as well, and I have kept in touch. And even the professors were friendly and they were nice. So it wasn't scary. It wasn't intimidating. It was friendly. It was nice. It was calm. It was a good experience. It really was. And that's about it.
Great.
That's all I have to say.
Thanks. Dan?
So for me, I have this 2-week window that I call my nervous window. Anything new, stresses me out a little bit for the first 2 weeks. And in all honesty, it was that way with Blackboard. I was unfamiliar with it. I didn't know how to really use it. But what I found was that it was really fairly simple. Each professor basically puts on sort of or lists the same categories, like you'll have discussion boards or group work. It really was very user friendly. You can get your grades on there. And while you couldn't access and I use a PC, by the way, while you couldn't access the whole sort of desktop version from a phone, I was able to download a Blackboard app. And oftentimes I checked the discussion boards or I checked my grades a lot. um, but it really was not difficult. And one thing I will say is when I first was accepted to SPS and began the journey, you go through a little orientation. And in this orientation, it goes through everything. They actually have you put assignments up, and the staff really helps to make sure that the transition into the program and the use of Blackboard is doable. It's really a simple program to work.
Great. I'm glad you brought up, Diane, the orientation. So, just to stress what Diane said, we really don't want anyone to ever feel like they don't know what's going on when they first enter online learning, or they feel like they're not. A lot of students say, I'm not tech savvy. You don't have to be tech savvy. Blackboard is very user friendly, and we put all new students through a new student orientation the 2 weeks prior to classes starting, so that they kind of know, how do the discussion boards work? How do you post an assignment? How do you download an article? It's just to kind of familiarize you with the Blackboard site and how things work, so that when classes open on day one, that you know what you're doing. Jacqueline, what were your experiences?
Well, I actually tried posting Blackboard assignments on my Android. And it turns out that I learned that I actually can't copy and paste from my Android. So I had a hard time doing that, because then I had to type the whole thing over in Blackboard on my phone. But I was able to access Blackboard, the whole desktop, on my Android. So yeah, it actually does work on Android. And I was using my PC. I don't use Mac or iOS, but on my PC it worked perfectly fine. Usually sometimes you may encounter like, it's running a bit slow to upload assignments, and that's probably just some kind of administrative issues or something, on the other end. So it's always really good, like Dr. Marquez told me, to upload your assignments way before the due date, like the due time. If it's due at 11 p.m., you want to try to make sure you upload it at least an hour before, just in case there's any issues. And it may take even up to 20 minutes to upload. It has happened to me before.
And was that particularly with like YouTube links or videos?
Actually, no, it was also with like essays and
Oh, okay.
research papers and things like that as well.
Great. So I want to take an opportunity just to thank our panelists, Lauren, Diane, and Jacqueline, for taking time out of their busy schedules to sit with me remotely and in person, and to talk a little bit about their experiences in the program. And hopefully for those of you who are listening, it was helpful and it was insightful, and it gave you some real ups and downs of what it's like to be in online learning, and gave you some useful information to help you in your decision making. The information that's on your screen now is my information on the top, including my email address and my phone number, and also the information for our assistant director, Ayana Peoples, phone number and email. If there are questions that arise after we log off here and you want them answered, please feel free to reach out to either of us. We're happy to answer your questions. And with that, I just want to wish you a really good day, and thank you again for participating. Thank you.